The 109th Tour de France is almost upon us, so I've been joined by Vern Pitt, and we are going to cast our mythical eyes forwards to see what the riders are going to be up against. Now today we are being hosted by the Queen Stage, which is a cycling themed pub in Effingham. It's absolutely beautiful here, and it's fair to say that their coffees and drinks are absolutely top notch, so do make sure you give them a visit. First up, we're going to go through some of those key stats, and then we'll start to look at the stages and look at the key riders on those stages. The key stats of this year's tour are that we've got 21 stages across 4 different countries, and that's going to be across Denmark, France, Belgium and Switzerland. We've got 5 flat days, 2 individual time trials, 8 hilly days and 7 mountain stages. We're going to start with the key sprint stages. Vern, what's the first one they're going to be up against?
Well, the first opportunity for the sprinters is going to come on stage 2. And I say it's going to come on stage 2, but there's going to be a lot of people who are going to try and make that not happen, particularly as the stage follows the coast pretty much all day. So if there's any kind of wind, yeah, it'll present opportunities for people to split the race up.
Exactly, so I'm guessing we could be in for a lot of echelons as people kind of battle to stay together.
Yeah, and even more so, it probably won't even take that much, because even more so than being on the coast, right before the finish, there's this really long bridge which the riders are going to cross. For starters, it will look spectacular, but it won't take much wind on a bridge, as anyone who's driven over to Wales will tell you, to create issues.
And I guess even though they've got fresh legs, you know, those winds in Copenhagen could be pretty strong, couldn't they?
It could quite easily, and not to mention the fact that your average early stage of the Tour de France is pretty chaotic anyway. Everyone's got fresh legs. There's lots of people who've got, for various reasons, desires to either make the stage or split the group up or what have you.
It could be a bit of an upset. We could either see your classic bunch sprint, or actually we could just see someone break off the front who's managed to kind of ride in the wind fairly well. And then on to stage 4. It looks a lot lumpier compared to the previous days. Thoughts on that one?
Well, I mean, yeah, this is sort of 4 days. If anyone's ever watched the 4 Days of Dunkirk territory, you'll know it's constantly rolling around there, and it can be kind of quite unpredictable. So yeah, it is much more lumpy. You would expect potentially them to control it for a sprint, but there's plenty of opportunity there for someone to kind of win from a breakaway, or for people to kind of split the group up in some way. And it's worth mentioning as well that this stage comes immediately after the riders will have done a flight the following day on the rest day from Denmark to Lille, and then travelled up to the start of Dunkirk. Even though it's fairly early in the tour, there's still a bit of unpredictability in kind of how people will fare.
Absolutely, and I think it kind of looks like it might not be your pure sprinter, but it could be kind of your kind of really strong one-day classics kind of rider who could fare pretty well. And then the next one after stage 15 is stage 19 for the sprinters, and that one looks a whole lot flatter and looks like it's going to be very controlled. I think you might end up with your classic breakaway, catch the breakaway, sprint finish.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they let only 2 people go up the road on a day like this.
Yeah.
I mean, assuming there's even a couple of sprinters teams still willing to chase, then there's no way that's not ending in a bunch sprint. If it doesn't end in a bunch sprint, I'll eat my inner tubes or something.
I would love to see that. And then, of course, we've got stage 21. Never really a proper stage, but the sprint does still matter. And as Mark Cavendish always referred to it, it was the unofficial world champs of the sprint. So sadly, he won't be there. But I think basically it's whoever makes it to the finish line, isn't it? It's whoever can get themselves to stage 21, stay in the race for that long, survive the mountains. It's going to kind of be best of whoever's there, really, isn't it?
It is kind of going to be best of whoever's there, and that's why you'd be brave to bet against Wout van Aert, I think,
yeah.
Because whilst on paper it would favour a Fabio Jakobsen or a Caleb Ewan, he's one of the guys who's probably going to survive best throughout the rest of the race. Although he will likely have been working for Primož Roglič.
Exactly, so he's actually going to have a massive training load in his legs from the mountain. So it's if he can recover and if he can stay fresh enough just to deliver that final sprint, then he could take it. I mean, he did it last year.
Yeah, exactly. So you'd be brave to bet against him.
Exactly that. On to the key GC stages now, and actually I'm going to start things off with stage 1 because we are starting with an individual time trial. So what do you think we're going to see from there? Because I mean, it's very early on into the race, but we should be able to see who's going well.
They call it the race of truth for a reason. So every GC guy is going to have a pretty good understanding of where they stand in the pecking order come the end of that day. And while that stage isn't very long, there will be small time gaps that you might prove significant later.
I'm going to move things on actually to stage 7 because I think that's when we next see like the first bit of a GC shake-up because we've got a more interesting finish to it. So that one is up Super La Planche del Fi. Oh, terrible French pronunciation there. But that one, you know, mountain finish, and because it's the Super, does that mean that it's got the gravel finish?
So it's got the gravel section at the end that they went up in 2019. On that occasion, Geraint Thomas was particularly one of the better kind of GC guys. But I think the biggest kind of lesson to take from that day was just how big you can make the gaps were. They don't look very big, but because they're going so slow, because it's like nearly 25%, like you can actually you can gain a decent chunk of seconds if you can put even just a small gap between you and some of your rivals up there. The climb is really steep up to the regular finish, up to the tarmac, or about 20% I think is the final ramp. Then you've got a tiny bit of flat and then you hit the gravel. The fact that it's gravel, I don't think is terribly significant because it's not long enough to cause punctures or anything, but the fact that it's 25% as well, and that's anyone who's ridden on stuff like that's going to know you've got to be able to control the bike, get the traction, all that kind of stuff, all while trying to race people. I don't know if you'll see anyone lose it, but you could see someone have it slip from their grasp a little bit.
Yeah. On to stage 9, and that presents us with our first mountain stage of the day. Talk us through it. What are we looking at?
Well, so this is kind of circling around Switzerland mostly. It has got significant mountains. There's 2 Cat 1 climbs, one fairly close to the finish, but I wonder if the GC teams will decide to keep their powder dry on a day like this and just save it for the rest of the Alpine stages to come. But it only takes one person to decide actually it's worth my while having a go to see what happens.
On to stage 11, and that is an out-and-out GC day. Talk us through it. What have we got in there?
Well, you've got the biggest mountain of the entire race on this day, 2,600 metres, the Galibier. You can expect that to be ridden at pace because the GC teams want to kind of put a bit of hurt into everyone's legs, try and whittle it down. You can at least one team's going to try and do that. I bet on it being Jumbo-Visma. And then you've got the final, also Oars category climb up to the finish, which I suspect is where the most of the fireworks will happen.
So after a pretty brutal day going up the Galibier, you're actually then followed into stage 12, where I think you go up it again, but then you're also dealing with Alpe d'Huez. So you've got 2 pretty mammoth days back to back.
Yeah, exactly. And I wouldn't be surprised if at least one GC contender has fallen out of contention spectacularly the day before. Certainly winning on Alpe d'Huez in the Jersey, only one person's ever done it if we don't count that Texan guy, which is Geraint Thomas. He was in the form of his life that day, and I would say like that point was the point at which he knew he was going to win that Tour de France. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes this time around on what is a quite similar but not quite as hard stage.
No, absolutely. It's also worth bearing in mind that obviously stage 12 on Bastille Day, could we see a Frenchman go crazy?
Everyone loves to see a Frenchman do well on Bastille Day, even if you're not French. It's fun to watch. So, and there's plenty of good French climbers in the race that could do something. You've got Gaudu for FDJ, particularly if he's not up there on GC anymore for one reason or another. Maybe Barguil, I think his best days are behind him, but you know, he can probably pull it out for a day. And my personal favourite for this is Bardet. He looked absolutely great at the Giro until he got sick. And if he's kept even any of that form going into this, he looked the best he's done for years. So I'd love to see him get some success there.
Stage 17 up next, big GC day, 3 first category climbs. Thoughts on it?
We're quite deep into the race by this point, so we should have a pretty good picture of who's going well and who's, not going so well. I think definitely this stage presents opportunities to assault the yellow jersey. But for starters, a team that's strong enough can set a really killer place over those final climbs. And it's worth bearing in mind the stage is only 135 kilometres long, and all of the climbing's packed into the last half of that. So that is a lot of climbing. And then at the end of all that climbing, you go up the Périgueux, which is pretty damn steep, particularly at the end. So you could easily see, I don't think you'll see minutes, but you could easily see 30 seconds or so swinging one way or another.
Is there a particular rider you think's got their name written all over this one?
It's got Pogacar written all over it, isn't it? It's got lots of climbing and it ends in a really steep ascent. like if he isn't in the jersey by the end of this day, I think, something's probably gone wrong for him.
Absolutely. So after another sprint stage, which we already mentioned on stage 19, giving the climbers a little bit of rest, we're then coming into stage 20, the final individual time trial, which is actually fairly long at 40 kilometers. We haven't actually seen something of that length for a bit of time. Thoughts on it? Are we going to see a repeat of, Pogačar doing one over on Roglic?
Well, I mean, never say never. I think that's fairly unlikely though, that someone's going to collapse that badly. What's interesting and what the 2020 Tour demonstrated is that a time trial of this kind of length, this deep in the race, is less about how good you are at time trialing and more about how well you've survived the previous 3 weeks. And so that can throw up surprising results. This doesn't have the big climb that did when it in 2020. So I'd be surprised if you saw really, really big gaps, but if it's quite close, you could see it swing one way or another. You never know. You could have someone blow up potentially, but I suspect the gaps between those guys will be fairly small.
So we've taken a look at those key stages, but now we need to look at the riders who are going to be taking them on. First up, we're going to look at the sprinters, and we've actually got a big roster of sprinters and a lot of fast men who are going to be contending them.
Well, I think in terms of like flat sprinters, the man to beat at the moment is Fabio Jakobsen.
Yeah.
As we're recording this, we don't know if they're going to take him, but I think the smart money is on them taking him over Mark Cavendish. He's kind of the man to beat. Whenever he's rocked up at a race, he's been the best sprinter in the field this year, and obviously he has the benefit of being on Quick Step Alpha Vinyl and their legendary
best lead out train in the world.
Yeah, exactly. So arguably the second best lead out train in the world is to be on Fabio Jakobsen's wheel on the back of the best lead out train in the world.
Absolutely.
So he's going to be the guy that everyone's going to be looking at.
It could be that actually the teams that have kind of more all-round riders, so your Van der Poels, your Wout van Aerts, they can actually sneak quite a few wins in behind Quickstep if they can ride the wheels right.
We're kind of talking about the green jersey, aren't we? And
yeah.
Wout van Aert is the clear out-and-out favourite for that. I think the only thing going against him is how much he is required to do a job for his team and how they manage that the kind of conflict of interest between him and Primož Roglic. But if he's allowed enough length to kind of go for those stages and go for intermediate sprints, then he'll be the favourite for the green jersey.
Now, another man, a previous winner, Sam Bennett, thoughts on him?
Well, he's not had the greatest of years so far with his move to Bora Hansgrohe. That said, he did win a race fairly recently, if I recall, and he does seem to be coming back to form. He certainly, no one's going to question, he's still a class rider, he's still a class sprinter. He just needs to re-find where he was a couple of years ago, because he was at that point the guy to beat. But
then actually, one guy we cannot forget about, Mr. Green Jersey himself, the old Peter Sagan. Do we think he's fallen off?
Yes. No, can we stop talking about Peter Sagan?
Oh, really? Okay, so there we go.
I mean, look, he had a really good time at Tour de Suisse. It was back to kind of winning ways, but I don't think he's anywhere near the Peter Sagan of old still. And when he's up against the likes of Wout van Aert, I don't really give him much hope. You never know. He might get lucky. Might be able to sneak a stage or something. He's still a very good bike rider, but I don't think
probably a whole bunch of top fives.
I think exactly. He's going to be in the back of a lot of photos.
Absolutely. And then I guess actually another guy who sadly hasn't really been able to finish too many Grand Tours is Little Caleb Ewan. We can't. It's been frustrating at the least to see him keep crashing out so early on. If he can stay upright, do you think that we could see some fireworks from him?
I think so. I mean, the thing that goes against him, I think, this year is that he was at the Giro and fairly consistently lost to all the other sprinters. He didn't win a stage there. He was there or thereabouts. I think something that's quite often underrated about him is that he is actually quite good at getting over those slightly hillier days or those slight draggy uphill finishes that some sprinters don't like. He's actually pretty good at those. So I think he should definitely get a stage.
Yeah, and actually, maybe stage 19 could be for him because that is late into the race, and if he can get over the mountains, it's his to lose, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
We've got a lot of fast men still to talk about, so we'll try and get them through them as fast as possible. First up, Mads Pedersen. Thoughts?
decent in a bunch sprint, probably better in a small group. That Dunkirk stage 4, that's the kind of thing where you want to look to Mads Pedersen.
Absolutely. Michael Matthews?
If I was Matt White, the sports director at Bike Exchange, I would probably bet on Groenewegen before I'd bet on Michael Matthews. But they are quite different. Matthews, again, is in that kind of Pedersen mould. Yeah. You might put him in a break somewhere, see if you can make it to the finish.
John Degenkolb and Alexander Kristoff, a couple of fast guys. Again, they can kind of do it all to some extent.
Yeah, those are guys that in the past could do it all. Are they up to the kind of sort of younger Mathieu van der Poels? Yeah. You think about it, any situation they're going to win in, Van der Poel's probably going to be there.
Yeah.
I don't really fancy their chances.
Exactly. And speaking of Van der Poel, I think we can probably expect to see a couple of stages out of him.
I would. He's already said that he doesn't want to go for the green jersey. Yeah. You can definitely see him winning a stage or two. There are very few situations where you're going to lose money betting on Mathieu van der Poel.
So, most importantly, of course, the key GC riders. We've got a long list here. We might think it's a bit of a two-horse race, but we will talk about the others that could maybe pull something out of the bag. Who do we think? Because obviously, we'll get onto Primoz and we'll get onto Pogačar a bit later.
Will we? Okay.
But who else have we got? Because we might see Froome there. Will he do anything?
No.
No. Quintana?
No.
Won't do anything. Adam Yates?
Maybe. So Adam Yates obviously caught COVID going into this race. Which is not ideal.
It's not really what you want in the build-up to a Grand Tour.
No one wants to be in the build-up to a Grand Tour. And he has definitely been, over the last few years, one of the one-week stage races to beat. But he's always found a way to fall down in some way, shape or form when it comes to the 3 weeks. I think he's definitely got it in him. He's just never managed to string it together. And so if he can string it together, he can be there in the mix.
Yeah.
And that would be quite valuable for Ineos. If they've got him and Geraint and Martinez potentially all in close contention, then that could potentially be very good for them.
Well, speaking of Martinez, then do you think that Adam would then slip into actually more of a support role to Martinez, who potentially could actually be, team captain? Definitely.
I think Martinez is a bit of he hasn't been talked about so much, probably because he's on a British English-speaking team. Yeah. But he was such a strong support rider to Bernal when he won the Giro. There was that day when he looked like he could have ridden away from Bernal. Yeah. I think he could be a bit of a sort of a sleeper GC contender.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it'd be good to see them kind of coming back on top and potentially bring the fight to Pogačar, because he potentially has the chance to do that.
Yeah, I think I think if we're going to talk about Ineos briefly, I think their best hope at this point in time, just judging on what they've done lately, is Geraint Thomas. What with the way he performed in the Tour of Switzerland.
Yes.
Now that wasn't a field as deep as even the Dauphiné, arguably, especially after a whole bunch of people had gone home sick. But he's looked better every single race that you've seen him at. He's looked that little bit better, that little bit better, that little bit better. And, the next race is the Tour de France. So if he's that little bit better again, he'll be right there.
And then briefly, Damiano Caruso. He's had a decent set of results this year. Can we see anything from him?
Yeah, quite possibly. He had his best result on GC ever at the Giro last year when he was second. There was a temptation at that time, because he's an older rider, he's 34 now, to think, this was a one-off late stage, kind of late career kind of high point. But he's been consistently in the top 10 on GC in one-week stage races pretty much all this year. And he was fourth at the Criterium of Dauphiné. So
he's clearly riding well at the moment.
You definitely can't afford to ignore the guy, for sure.
And then there's another name that I've seen on a potential start list, which is Alexander Vlasov. What can you tell me about him?
Well, he had to leave the Tour of Switzerland when he contracted COVID. So he's in a similar situation to Adam Yates in that respect. But the thing to be said about Vlasov is he was leading the race at the time. And he is on Bora, who obviously have just won the Giro d'Italia. Yeah. He looked really strong at Swiss before he caught COVID. So assuming he's able to get over that and recover, I think he's a really strong contender.
So we've spoken about Adam. We should also probably speak about his twin, Simon. How do you think he's going at the moment?
Well, he obviously pulled out of the Giro, having won a couple of stages with a knee injury. Yeah. He was in great shape at that Giro. He won that opening time trial there. I think he could actually be a bit of a sort of sleeper GC person. Okay. If I was Matt White for the second time today, if I was Matt White at Bike Exchange, I'd be sort of saying, see how you go. Yeah. If at the end of the first week you're in the mix, why not give it a go?
For sure.
Because he was in what looked like the form of his life at the Giro.
Absolutely. Well, I think we can only hope the best for kind of some of our fellow countrymen. But I think we have to talk about the Slovenians, obviously.
Let's talk about the Slovenians.
Primoz Roglic and Tadej Pogačar. Is it kind of a done deal that essentially it's just going to be the Pogačar and Primoz show?
Yes.
Okay, great.
That is what's going to happen.
And I think it's fair to say that even though Primoz will bring the fight to Tadej, it's fair to say that Pogačar's probably already won the race.
Well, I think already run the race is probably a bit far, but he's certainly. How do you beat the question for every other GC rider is how do you beat Tadej Pogačar?
Yeah.
And the answer, well, if I knew the answer, I'd be selling myself to teams. Earlier in the year at the Tour of the Alps, Pogačar was just seemed to be riding away from people at will.
Yeah.
And he made it look easy.
Yes.
And that's just the world we're living in now. He is the preeminent GC rider. Something will probably have to happen for him to kind of fall off that perch, or for even someone else to beat him.
Absolutely.
But it's the Tour de France.
Yeah.
Stuff happens.
So time for some predictions. We'll start with the green jersey. Who do you think's taking that one home?
I think the biggest competition with the green jersey is going to be between Wout van Aert and the management at Jumbo-Visma, and whether they let him pursue the intermediate kind of points that he'll need to get it. If they don't let him do that, then it'll be harder for him. And in that case, it might swing back towards whoever the best bunch sprinter is, which is probably Fabio Jakobsen.
Yes.
So I think it's probably between those two.
Sure. Okay, and then let's look towards polka dot and white jersey, because you can kind of bundle them together. Who do you think is going to be taking those ones home?
Yeah, so I think really it's Pogačar or Pogačar, really. Those are your options.
Yeah.
Assuming he finishes the race.
You think it could be a clean sweep of all of them?
Well, I think it's if he wins yellow, then he's going to win the white by default.
Of course.
And he'll probably win the polka dot because he'll probably win a couple of mountain stages.
Yes.
So I don't see a world in which if Pogačar's still in the race and is performing at the Pogačar sort of levels we've become accustomed to, he doesn't win all three of those.
To be honest, I completely agree. I think we will see Pogačar in all three of those jerseys, and then a Jakobsen or a Wout van Aert in the green. So there we have it. Those are all of our key stages and key riders. Let us know down in the comments who you think will be taking home the jerseys. If you enjoyed the video, drop it a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and we will see you again very soon. On to the key GC stage.
How many of those are there?
21!
21, there's 21 key GCs.
There's 25 key stages.
Including the rest days. The art of the GC rider is consistency, and that's why we've listed out pretty much every stage.